There's a $12 bottle in half the garages in America that's currently finishing off a 200,000-mile engine inside 500 miles. The product's fine, it's just aimed at the wrong part of the engine. So we pulled the 3 most argued about bottles on the shelf and read every word on them. Seafoam, Chevron Techron, Marvel Mystery Oil. All 3 promise to strip carbon off your injectors and your intake valves. Not one tells you what's inside. One of them prints directions that can cost you the motor. By the end, you'll know which one to buy, which stays in the tank, and which line to never follow. Section 1. Read all 3 labels. $12 is about to change hands for a bottle that can't physically reach the deposit it's being bought to remove, and the packaging won't say a word about it. The idle won't change afterward. The buyer will decide he needed 2 bottles next time. Seafoam's front panel lists 9 separate jobs. Cleans injectors, cleans carb jets, stabilizes fuel, pulls moisture out of fuel and oil, adds lubricity, frees lifters and rings, cleans carbon, lubes upper cylinders, de-ices. 9 promises, 1 can. Marvel Mystery Oil calls itself a 4-in-1 and says it strips carbon and gum out of carburetors, injectors, and intake valves while improving compression, power, and fuel economy. Techron says it deep cleans the entire fuel system in 1 treatment. So all 3 make the same core promise, and standing in that aisle, the labels give you nothing to choose between. Now look for the active ingredient. Seafoam describes itself as a blend of cleaning and lubricating petroleum ingredients. Techron lists light petroleum distillate and proprietary additives. Marvel names no chemistry at all. 3 bottles, 0 named actives. That's the aisle you're shopping in, and it's exactly how they'd like you to shop it. So the label settles nothing. What settles it is where the dirt actually sits and whether what's in the bottle survives the trip to reach it. Section 2. The 60-second check. One detail about your engine decides every word that follows, and it isn't the badge, the mileage, or the oil you run. It's where the injector sits. On a port injected engine, the injector sprays into the intake port just behind the valve. Every drop of fuel washes across the back of that valve on its way into the cylinder. So whatever's riding in your gas lands on the deposit, thousands of times a minute, every mile you drive. Toyota's 2 GR-FE, Honda's K24, GM's 5.3 Vortec, the 4.6 in an older Mustang. All port injected, all getting washed. On a direct injected engine, the injector sits down in the combustion chamber and sprays past that valve entirely. Fuel never touches the back of it, ever. Ford's EcoBoost, Volkswagen's TSI, most Mazda Skyactiv, and nearly everything sold new today. One search with your year, make, and model settles which one you own, and it takes about a minute, which puts half of you in a position nobody at the parts counter will mention. Nothing you pour in that tank reaches your intake valves. Not Techron, not Seafoam, not a $40 boutique bottle with a race car on the front. The fuel doesn't go there, so the cleaner doesn't either, no matter what's printed on the can. That isn't an opinion about additives, that's plumbing. Check yours, because you might be about to find out your money was never going to fix the thing you were buying it for. Stay to the end, and I'll tell you what does work for you. And the oldest bottle on that shelf has been getting away with the same sentence since 1923. Section 3. Marvel Mystery Oil. I came into this expecting to write Marvel off completely. It earned a place, just nowhere near the one printed on the front of the bottle. Your father ran it, and you'd know the smell blindfolded. It's also the cheapest thing here by a wide margin. 32 ounces for around $6 and change, which lands near 20 cents an ounce. The other 2 cost you multiples of that. So what is it? Strip the marketing off, and Marvel is a mineral oil base carrying a light solvent, a thin lubricant. That's what it's been for a century. Here's where the bottle overreaches. Marvel claims it removes carbon deposits from your injectors and your intake valves. A mineral oil with a mild solvent in it doesn't do that. Solvents lift what's soft and wet, and the carbon on the back of a high-mileage intake valve has been heat cycled for years into something closer to charcoal. Thin oil never touches it. But run Marvel where it belongs and it earns its shelf space honestly. An ounce or 2 in the crankcase on an engine with a ticking lifter usually quiets it down, because a sticky hydraulic lifter is a lifter gummed with varnish, and a light oil carrying a mild solvent is what frees one. Its claim about smoother starts on a car that sat all winter is real for the same reason. That's a genuine job, worth about $6, which is precisely what they charge for it, and nowhere near the job you clicked on this video to solve. The can beside it charges twice as much and claims that job plus 8 more. Section 4. Seafoam in the tank. Seafoam gets defended harder than anything else in this category, and for the way most people use it, that defense holds up. Around $10 for a 16-ounce can, and its own description of itself runs 4 words: cleaning and lubricating petroleum ingredients. The safety data sheet fills in what the label won't: a light petroleum oil, naphtha, and isopropyl alcohol. 3 ingredients, all behaving the way you'd expect them to. The alcohol is the interesting one. Isopropyl alcohol grabs water, so if you've got a truck that sits half the year, or a boat, or a mower, Seafoam pulls that water into suspension and lets the engine burn it off instead of leaving it down there eating the tank from the inside. The label says it stabilizes stored fuel up to 2 years, and that claim holds. On a gummed carburetor, the naphtha genuinely dissolves varnish. Nothing else on that shelf handles stale fuel better for the money. That part of the front panel is earned. Then look again at what those 3 ingredients are: oil, naphtha, alcohol. Solvents and carriers, no detergent among them, and solvents share one problem: they flash off. By the time an intake charge has run through a port sitting at several hundred degrees and into a chamber running far hotter, the solvent is long gone. It never arrives where the hard carbon lives. So Seafoam takes off what's soft and wet and leaves what's baked on. And that's why the injector and carb jet claims stand up far better than the carbon cleaner line printed 2 rows underneath them. Stop the test here and Seafoam finishes a respectable second. But we didn't stop here, because the tank isn't where most people pour it into a 200,000-mile engine. Section 5. Techron. Techron prints less about its own chemistry than either bottle we've covered, and it's still the only one of the 3 whose active ingredient you can name with certainty. Under $9, 10 ounces, and a back panel that gives you light petroleum distillate, proprietary additives, and that's your lot. Except that particular proprietary additive stopped being a secret decades ago. Chevron's own technical literature and patent filings identify the active as polyetheramine, PEA. And Chevron doesn't buy somebody else's chemistry and pour it into a bottle. They manufacture the stuff, which is why the same family of additive turns up in the fuel at their pumps. PEA was built for the one thing solvents can't do: survive the trip. A detergent has to ride into the combustion chamber, take the heat, and still be intact when it lands on a deposit that's been cooking there for years. Cheaper chemistries fall apart before they arrive. PEA holds together, pulls carbon off injector tips, valve backs, and chamber surfaces, then leaves with the exhaust. That gap shows up in a lab. AAA ran fuel carrying a real detergent package against fuel running on the legal minimum and weighed what each left on the intake valves after 4,000 simulated miles. 34 milligrams on one, 660 on the other. 19 times the deposit, from a difference you can't see at the pump. Read Techron's directions and they're stricter than the other 2. 1 whole bottle into a nearly empty tank, then fill with up to 15 gallons. It works at concentration or it doesn't work, which is the opposite of the bottle we just covered, because Seafoam prints a 3rd set of directions we haven't touched yet, and that's the set that ends engines. If somebody you know has one of these 3 bottles sitting in their garage, send them this before they open it. The next 90 seconds are the part nobody warned them about. Section 6. The part that ends engines. Seafoam's back panel gives you 3 uses. 2 of them are honest. The 3rd is the reason some of these engines never see 210,000 miles. Add it to fuel. Stabilize stored fuel with it. And add it to your crankcase oil, 1 ounce for every quart. Read what the label says that 3rd use does for you. It removes oil residues and deposits that can restrict oil flow. Now read it again because the can has just described the exact way an engine dies, and it's selling it to you as the benefit. A motor with 200,000 miles on it has a pan and a valve train caked in 2 decades of deposits, and nearly all of that material is doing nothing at all. It's parked, it's out of the way. Pour a solvent in and you don't dissolve it, you unstick it. Now it's circulating and it's hunting for somewhere to settle. It settles on the pickup screen. That screen is the mesh on the end of the tube that draws oil out of the pan and feeds the pump. Block it and pressure falls, and a bottom end starved of oil starts eating itself alive. Your bearings ride on a film thinner than a human hair, so the moment that film goes, the crank is grinding on bare metal. You'll hear it as a knock from underneath, and by the time you hear it, the engine has already killed itself. The sludge moves the moment you pour solvent on it. The only open question is whether your screen is where it stops. Search any high-mileage forum for oil pressure after a flush, and you'll find the same thread 100 times over. Ran it, drove it a week, watched the light come on. The replies underneath always land in the same place. Should have left it alone. Then it's a $12 can, a $1,200 bill to drop the pan and clean that screen if you catch it in time, and $5,000 for a used engine and the labor to fit it if you don't. You paid rebuild money for a solvent that costs pennies a gallon to blend. Here's the part that should annoy you. One printed line would have covered it. Do not use in an engine with heavy sludge. That sentence costs nothing to add to a panel that already carries 9 claims, and leaving it off is what keeps one can selling into 4 different markets at once. They save the ink, you're the one who finds out. Look at the treatment recommendations at the bottom of that same panel. Add it to the oil 100 to 300 miles before every oil change. That instruction only makes sense if whatever it frees needs draining out fast. It was written for an engine with clean oil passages, then handed to every driver in the aisle, including the one nursing a motor that's been holding itself together on its own sludge. Which leaves exactly one of these 3 that can do the job you came here for without putting the bottom end on the table. The clear winner? Techron takes it. Not because it does the most, because it's the only one of the 3 that reaches the dirt most people are trying to kill, and the only one that can't hurt you while it tries. Marvel Mystery Oil is a lubricant wearing a cleaner's marketing. It'll quiet a lifter, it'll help a car that's sat all winter, and it will not strip carbon off a valve, whatever the front of that bottle promises. Seafoam owns stale fuel and moisture, and in your tank, it does no harm at all. Follow its crankcase line on a high-mileage engine, and you've turned a $12 maintenance item into a coin flip on your bottom end. Techron does the one job it can name, a documented detergent aimed at the deposits behind the rough idle, the hesitation off the line, and the misfire code nobody can chase down. Nearly empty tank, whole bottle, fill up once every oil change. The math on it is almost rude. A dealer's induction service is this same idea performed by a technician on a lift, and it comes back at roughly $180 on your invoice. The bottle is $12, and you pour it in standing at the pump. Do it 3 times a year, and you've spent $36 keeping an engine idling like it did at 80,000 miles. If you run a Port Injected engine with high miles, and you buy 1 bottle this year, buy that one. And if you came back direct injected earlier, don't leave, because your answer is different and nobody in that aisle sells it. Section 7. If your engine is direct injected. There's one fix for your engine that works completely, one that only slows down what's coming, and one that costs nothing at all. Fuel never crosses your intake valves, so no detergent riding in it ever will either. The expensive one is walnut blasting. A shop pulls the intake manifold and blasts the carbon off the valves by hand with crushed shell. It works completely, and it runs $600 to $900 depending on the valve count and how buried the manifold is. That's the fix, and it's the only true one. The cheaper one is a catch can, which traps the oil vapor feeding those deposits before it reaches the valve. It won't clean what's already there, it slows down what's coming. The free one is how you drive it. Deposits build worst on engines that never get warm and never get worked. A long run at highway speed once a week won't scrub a valve, and it keeps the top end hot enough to stop making the problem worse. None of that fits on a bottle, so it never gets said out loud. Hold on to that, because it's the one thing all 3 of these bottles have in common. Here's the thread through all three. Nobody lied to you. They printed every use they could stand behind on one panel, left the chemistry off it, left the warning off it too, and sold the same promise to a guy with 200,000 miles who only ever read the front. Techron's the buy. Seafoam stays in the tank. Marvel keeps quieting your lifters like it did for your dad. Tell me which one's been in your garage the longest. And don't forget to subscribe.